Lawmakers bid a fond farewell this week to a lion of Illinois politics, and the 2026 legislative session is quickly winding to a close. From Capital News, Illinois, it's Friday, May 29th, and this is Capital Cast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Cast, a regular podcast of Capital News, Illinois. I'm Peter Hancock, and joining me this week is our editor-in-chief, Jerry Nowicki. Jerry, thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here, Peter.
As we record this podcast on Friday afternoon, lawmakers are plodding away at passing a budget and a handful of other major pieces of legislation. The scheduled adjournment day is Sunday, May 31st, which means it's likely they'll be working almost nonstop through the weekend. We'll talk about how things are shaping up here in just a minute, but before we do, there was another significant moment at the State House this week that deserves to be noted. Longtime U.S. Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois returned to the State House on Wednesday to give a farewell speech before a joint session of the General Assembly. It's a fairly rare occasion outside of the annual budget and State of the State addresses. Governor J.B. Pritzker was in attendance, along with members of the Illinois Supreme Court, so he had both the executive and legislative branches represented. I want to play a little soundbite here from his farewell speech and then get your reaction, Jerry.
Today we meet 5 months before a national election. Debates in Congress and contests in our courts indicate this next election may be challenged in ways we have never seen before in our history. Abraham Lincoln, in a House-divided speech that he gave here in Springfield, gave a grim warning that the divisions in America over the issue of slavery could destroy our nation. We see similar divisions today. The challenge we face in the days ahead could be just as serious. I hope that those of us blessed to live in this land of Lincoln will remember his warnings in 1858 and his counsel to those who lead this nation in our time.
So, kind of a stark warning in his farewell speech. What was your overall reaction to that?
Yeah, he talked a lot about his legacy and then ended with that point there. It was illustrated a bit, I think, in the fact that there were some Republican House lawmakers, the Freedom Caucus, that boycotted the speech. They weren't there. So, it's not an exaggeration. It's not hyperbole to say there are major divides and there are people out there, including the president, who just questioning American elections like we've never seen. So, it's the warning. It's not out of line from what we're seeing. I think, Senator Durbin even upset people in his own party recently with voting with Republicans on some of the, bills to end shutdown there in the government. So.
That's right. He said he has never voted to shut down the federal government, and he never would, even in his final year when a lot of Democrats were pressuring him to do just that.
Right. He's in some ways a relic of a bygone era. And I think as he steps down, he's worried about where things are going. And, I don't blame him for that. It was kind of an interesting speech just to hear how far he's come and over how many decades in Illinois politics.
Well, and you mentioned being a relic of a bygone era. I thought it was kind of interesting how before he got up to speak, several members of the legislature gave introductory speeches, among them State Representative Cam Buckner and State Senator Mike Simmons, both of whom had worked in his office prior to coming to the legislature. Dick Durbin was elected to the U.S. House in 1982. He's been there for more than 40 years, and I thought it was interesting that there were people in the audience who have never known a time when Dick Durbin was not representing Illinois in Congress. He's been there through your entire life and the entire life of a lot of people. And he mentioned at one point that during his tenure in Congress, he's had over 3,000 office interns working in his office, and that's not counting the staffers, the paid legislative aides who've come and gone, many of whom have since gone on to become legislators. They've been mayors, city council members. I think at least one other member of Congress, Sherry Bustos, had worked in his office at one point. So he not only influenced, but he actually kind of shaped and formed an entire generation of public officials, many of whom, have gone on to do significant things here in Illinois.
Yeah, I think Representative Buckner called him a bridge across generations in Illinois government, and I think it was a pretty apt description of it. Yeah, there's certainly no shortage of his legacy, and that was on full display there in the chamber. Okay,
well, it was a significant turning of the page in Illinois history and to an extent in U.S. history, and it certainly deserved to be noted. And I thought the occasion there with a joint session of the General Assembly with everybody there really kind of underscored how significant his career has been. But I want to turn now to the current events in the State House as we're winding down the end of the legislative session, only about 48 hours or so to go, we hope. Still waiting to see details of a budget. What do we know so far about how the budget is taking shape?
Not too much. I think we know that spending will be around $56 billion if we're following closely to the governor's plan. I guess that's one thing we know, is it's not going to be much more beyond what the governor proposed. Now, there will be jockeying for XYZ program included or this one cut or whatnot, but from all the reports we've found over the past several months, it's going to have to be pretty close to the total amounts that the governor proposed.
And there have been people, more progressive lawmakers and progressive interest groups who have been pushing for greater spending and additional revenue to pay for that spending through, enhanced revenue options. The governor has proposed some maybe more modest revenue options. What do we think is on the table there? And
there's the tax on the social media companies that I think would be the largest one. That would just be based on the number of users. That's something the Pritzker administration proposed in February, and then we just haven't heard anything about it since. So what does that language look like? How do they make it operational? I've heard there's some challenges in terms of the nitty-gritty of getting that done, but everything you hear is sort of just a rumor at this point because everything's being negotiated behind closed doors. And there are challenges. But in terms of the progressive revenue, the more taxes from billionaires type deal that the progressives are talking about, there's very, very little chance, probably no chance that happens and is included in this budget, which is, why I say that we're going to have to spend somewhere around the amount that the governor proposed in February.
And outside of the budget and revenue, a lot of lawmakers have certain policy priorities they're hoping to get passed before the last train leaves the station. What are some of the policy bills that are kind of the linchpin to pulling the rest of the session together?
Have you heard that the Chicago Bears are thinking of moving to Indiana?
That one does seem to be getting an awful lot of attention, despite the fact that arguably not the most socially significant issue out there, but is near and dear to the hearts of a lot of people, and there's a lot of concern about it.
Right. So I think that's, anything they negotiate in that regard, the governor has said has to be a good deal for taxpayers. So I think that's the challenge there. What's a good deal for taxpayers that gives away anything to a billionaire corporation? And now, of course, these tax breaks would come at the county, local level, so it wouldn't be direct state revenue that's impacted by a bill like that. But of course, we don't know the full details of how it would affect other areas of the state as well, in terms of other provisions that are or are not included in it. The original version was 35 pages, and then it was 370, whatever it was. So That's one we're watching. And then I'd say the governor's build plan.
That's right. The governor came out early, I think, in his State of the State address, and said he wanted some initiatives to make housing more affordable and to make housing development throughout the state easier, to bring down some bureaucratic hurdles. How is the build initiative going?
So the Senate had an 8-bill package, I think, regarding housing. I think 2 of them were directly sort of parallel to or similar or even the same as build. Mayors don't like it because essentially what it would do is it would have statewide zoning laws or regulations to sort of limit the way local governments can zone and say, oh, no, this can't be a multi-unit home. It's another one of those things where the exact parameters of it are under negotiation. We maybe don't know if something's going to pass. We don't know the exact, size limitations for something like this yet. But mayors don't like it, and I think the municipalities have quite a bit of power here, and they're working to kill it. And even though the governor still continues to have his social media ads, his campaign does anyway, pushing for it, it's on the fence here too.
Another issue that seems to cross the line between statewide issues and that crosses the desk of many local governments has to do with the development of data centers. There's some initiatives here to put some restrictions on these data centers, which consume huge amounts of electricity. Wasn't that long ago that we were offering incentives to get data centers in Illinois, and now there's a lot of concern, especially in local communities, about how much resources they draw down. Where do we stand on that legislation?
Yeah, there was a bill called the Power Act that would create more transparency. Honestly, that one's looking like it's dead. It's hard to say anything's dead on May 29th, but there hasn't been too much engagement from the governor. But the other thing is the incentives still are in place. That bill is still the law. The DCEO doesn't always have to work the hardest to grant them, but it was the governor in his February speech. He said, he wants to put a 2-year moratorium on them. That would require an act of the legislature. I don't know whether that'll be included in, some type of major package at the end, or even if we just won't have one. But, there's been, I think, about $1 billion in incentives promised to data centers in Illinois since that took effect. It's looking to me like that might not cross the finish line, but I'm just guessing at this point.
Another one out there, every year there is a Medicaid omnibus bill that includes all kinds of tweaks and changes and adjustments to the state's Medicaid program. This year is going to be pretty significant. A lot of different provider groups are worried about their reimbursement rates. A lot of federal changes are coming down as a result of the federal budget bill that Congress passed last summer that will affect hospitals, especially rural hospitals in Illinois. And the state's letting out new contracts for managed care organizations, or MCOs, and those new contracts will take effect in January, I believe. So that's another bill that a lot is being negotiated behind closed doors. Usually comes out, it's one of the final 3 or 4, maybe final 5 bills that pass, and we don't learn about the details of it until they're just about out the door. One other thing I wanted to ask about was artificial intelligence protections. It seems like we can't turn on any news program or even fire up our own computers these days without seeing some sort of story about artificial intelligence. It's a matter of big concern here in the General Assembly. Where do we stand on that?
Yeah, so Illinois passed the bill, sent it to Pritzker, to regulate the largest AI models, like the large language models. There's this type of de facto blue state collective that, in the absence of national regulation, is working on similar legislation across states. So New York and California, now Illinois, have done so. Illinois, they all kind of just make the companies outline the catastrophic risk to report some transparency on it. But Illinois goes a step further by requiring the companies to submit to third-party audits. Now, the interesting thing here is groups like Anthropic, ChatGPT supported this because if there's going to be this hodgepodge state approach, they want all of the regulations to look like each other rather than Illinois and California going in completely separate directions. So it had that support, but there were tech companies who are, might be on the bubble of because this one would regulate those with $500 million or more in revenue, I believe. And there are some who say, Anthropic and ChatGPT are much larger than that. So, they were upset that the threshold was set at the 500 million mark. But anyway, I think, long story short, governor says he's going to sign them, and Illinois will be another blue state in that collective of those regulating AI.
Okay, well, that is just a taste of some of the final issues that lawmakers are dealing with or recently have dealt with as the session winds to a close. We will be back with more information about how this story all ends after the legislative session is over, which we hope to be Sunday. Until then, that's all the time we have for this edition of Capital Cast. Capital Cast is a production of Capital News Illinois, a public affairs reporting project of the Illinois Press Foundation. I want to thank Jerry Nowicki for being here, and on behalf of the entire Capital News Illinois team, thank you for listening.